Oh boy, do I have a treat for you today. So, yeah, you might be wondering what these lights stand for. So, if I take a Pico and I hook it up to the output, then I can take a Fourier transform of it, find the frequencies, and then play those strings. So before we get into the programming, let's talk about the circuits. So again, I've got the LEDs connected, and then they go through here, and then they go to this Raspberry Pi, and this Raspberry Pi has power, and it has a serial USB, um, which is connected to keyboard and mouse, whatever. And one of the things it's also connected to is this Pico right here. You can see it's flashing maybe 3 times a second, maybe 4. And this Pico has ground and analog, and the analog is connected through here to the output of the bass guitar. And so when you play a string, this guy will take a Fourier transform, do a little bit of magic on it, and then just output the bare frequency on over this USB. So yeah, let's talk about that. Okay, so in order to get to the fun part, first we need some preparation. So we're going to need 2 repositories. The first one is this one by Alex Wolf. He took a ADC example from the SDK and he added an efficient FFT to it. And yeah, so if you're not familiar with Git, you just grab this, Control C it, and let's okay, and then git clone, and then the repo, and then in order to build it, it's pretty straightforward. Oh, so now we get to the first tricky part. So this requires the repositories from the SDK for the Pico, and so that's the second repository we need, and that is this guy right here, which is the Raspberry Pi Pico SDK. So let's back out. Okay, and then we'll go to the Pico SDK. Now there's one more step that, I don't know, maybe they tell you somewhere, but I didn't see it, and that is that we need submodules. And so we do this git submodule update. Because we're going to need this tiny USB in order for the thing to talk to us. But anyways, I've already done this. So yeah, once you do this, so the first thing you want to do is go to make a build, make build, cd build, familiar with cmake, cmake ... And then so that's going to do a bunch of stuff. It's basically going to prepare the build, and then once you're done with that, you do make -j, I don't know, 2 or 4, or just make. Anyways, yeah, so once that's made, then the next step is to go to your bash file, so that's going to be in your home directory, and you're going to vim, or whatever your favorite editor is. You're going to look at bash rc, and all the way at the bottom you need to export the Sdk path, and that's basically wherever you put your Sdk repo, and you build it, that's where you want to do that. Okay, we're done with that step. So now we can go over to the awolf and then go to adcfft, and then we can make there a build, build, make dot dot, and yeah, and so that will build, and then make. I probably should have done make -j4, but whatever. And yeah, and so that'll build out your file. Okay, so once you've made it, you can open up your file thingy, and you're looking for this one right here. I don't know if you can read it, but it's the .uf2 file. And so what you want to do next is you want to take your Pico and unplug it, and then hold this power or this button right here, and then plug it in. And if you do it right, well, one, you'll see that it's reset. It's not really doing anything anymore. And then it asks if you can open up in the file manager, and then you just take this file and drag it in there, and it'll just kind of like exit out on its own. And there you go, it's working again. Okay, so what you're seeing right here is a script which basically just displays the Fourier transform of what the bass guitar is or what the system is reading. I just played a note. I played the second string. I don't remember what that second string is called or what it's set to, but I can tell you that it's about 53 hertz. And then we've got these harmonics, which kind of complicate the system, but actually in the end end up helping you if you know how. But just to see, I'm going to play a different note. There you go. So I played a 97 hertz right there, and you can see that we've got peaks at 97. But then the question is, how do I know which one of these is the real one, or the important, like then the note that I feel like I'm hearing as a human? And so what I did is I made a script which tracks down. First, it finds all the local peaks that are above a certain threshold, and then it finds whenever something is whenever one of the peaks is a multiple of another peak, it gives it a point. And so in the end, that basically tracks down who is the bass harmonic, and that one tends to be the note that I wanted to play. And so yeah, so you can see that if we do that, we'll find 97 for this note, and then let me play a lower note. Let me try it again. There we go. And so yeah, we got this one at 30, around 40, and I think my bass guitar might be a little low too, and I think the first one's got to be 44, but yeah. And so yeah, so you can use this to track down what frequency you meant to play, and then send that out. There was a second issue, which was more of a mathematical one, and that's, let's say you want your spacing in between each one of your frequency band, ticks, I guess you could say. You want that spacing to be 1 hertz, right? You want to be able to tell the difference between 49 and 50 hertz. So the problem with that is that if you're going all the way down to 0, which is what the Fourier transform does, then that means that the difference between the 0th index and the first index is 1 hertz, right? So that first peak, if there was something there, that would be 1 hertz. And if you think about that, 1 hertz is 1 tick per second, which means, or 1 wave per second, or whatever you want to call it. And what that means is that you have to wait a whole second before you can tell me if there's something there or not. And that means that we'd only get one measurement per second, which means you can only play 1 note per second. And so all that stuff gets kind of messy. So the way I got around that was I shortened the amount of time I'm giving it to record samples. So basically I'm recording, you know, I think it was like 5 samples per second, and then it gets a bit slowed down because of, I think it's the UART that's actually slowing things down, but that's a different story. The point is that I'm doing 5 samples per second, and then I'm filling it in. I'm basically, if I'm only recording for 1/5 of a second, I'm giving the Fourier transform a bunch of zeros. I'm padding it with zeros out to a full second. And that way, the Fourier transform thinks that it's getting a full second's worth, and it can give me values down to 1 tick, 1 hertz, but it's basically going to be empty, as you can see down here, because again, I'm giving it zeros. But yeah, that way you can keep the resolution of 1 hertz per tick, but also not have to measure a whole second's worth in order to figure out what note you're measuring. So just a quick recap of the code. I'm going to be skipping through a lot of just the base code, the stuff that Alex wrote. So yeah, let's just go through this, blah, 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 setups, getting the right size for everything. As you can see, I'm making everything bigger because I'm going to be padding it with zeros. So here's the magical part where the ADC, I think, actually does direct memory access to capture the data, make everything faster. Yeah, then you get the average so that you can bring it down because, I don't know, I guess it helps if it's around 0, if their average is 0. Yeah, and then you load the Fourier transform, and then you do the Fourier transform, and then yeah. Oh, and then I cut out frequencies below a certain amount and above a certain amount, just so it doesn't give me, because obviously I'm not going to be playing a 33 hertz note with my bass guitar, and maybe that's where the zeros came from earlier, but you get the idea. Yeah, so then we set up a cutoff, and we go through, and basically this is where we find peaks, right? If this number is greater than the number before it and it's greater than the number after it, then that's a peak. And then we go through the peaks and we say, does this fit into the other, does the smaller number fit into the larger number within 2 spaces? So like, does 5 fit into 9 within 2? Yeah, I'll have a remainder of 1, and so I guess technically a remainder of 4, but you get the idea. That's this side over here. And if it does, then that guy gets a counter. And then we go through and figure out who's got the most counters, and that's our frequency. And then I say, okay, if you have at least 1 harmonic, then we're going to display it. Because otherwise there's just a lot of noise in there too. And yeah, and then some other setup stuff. Just to go over the code that's actually running on the Raspberry Pi, we got a bunch of libraries and threading because we need to do 2 things at the same time. The first one is we're going to be catching that the Hertz signal from the Pico, and that's the first thread, is just read it, and we're going to do a toggle back and forth. That way I know if it changed, and I only do stuff if it changed. And it comes with some extra stuff on it, so I just cut it out before I load it in. And then we got a bunch of addressable LED stuff. So here I just went through and I made an array for each string, and each, I don't know, chord, is that what it's called, has its own frequency that it plays at, so that's what it's going to be searching through. This function is the sum up function. Basically it converts from what I'm calling chord and tab, or chord and fret, whatever you want to call it, you know, your X and your Y on your bass guitar to the individual line, since, you know, this is actually just one, well, it thinks it's one addressable LED cable. Yeah. So we got the simple, relatively simple play note command or function, which you know, plays the note that you tell it to at whatever brightness and changes color depending on what note it is. And then we got a clear note function, and here's the show note. So this is the other thing, that the other thread that's running, and basically, right, 'cause it's while true, and if it's something changed, so if we got a new message, then get rid of all the old ones. I was doing some debugging with I wasn't sure if it was doing everything too quickly. It's not, but I guess I left that in there, so you can ignore that part. But yeah, so it clears the old things, and then it checks through those arrays, and there's probably a better way to do this, but you know, we got plenty of firepower on these things, so on the Pi Zero. So yeah, so it checks through the array, and it sees, like, is the hertz that it picked up within 2 values of those arrays that we showed earlier. And if it is, then play that note, and then it checks through all 4 strings, and then it records the note so that it can erase it later. And that's about it. And then the main function is launch the reading the serial and launch the show note. So yeah, just to show you again, you can play a note, play another note, play a note, note. I think I have to retune my bass. And it's kind of cool, it plays, you know, all 4 of them. You can't see the last one. It plays all 4 of them, right? Because they all play the same sound. Yeah.